Welcome to Rash's World, where you will hear prominent voices, psychoanalysts, psychologists, therapists, philosophers, and thought leaders talk about a variety of mental health concerns and problems, including how to deal with anxiety, depression, and chronic conditions, and how to become more resilient, find inner peace, be emotionally engaged in your personal and professional life, and just be your beautiful, authentic self. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rash's World. Today we have a special guest, Cynthia Moore. How are you doing today?
We're doing great. Thank you.
That's awesome. So, how would you briefly describe yourself? And that's going to be a tough thing to do, but briefly for our audience, what would you say about yourself?
Well, I started out as a performer, playwright, director, pivoted to become a psychotherapist, and now I've written a memoir about both of those parts of my life.
Oh, it all comes together. I love that. Yeah, because
It all comes
I have you
together.
as a playwright, performer, mental health counselor, author. So I was going to say, which hat are we going to start off with? But let's start with the memoir. And it's called Dancing on Coals, a memoir of an overperformer. So the Dancing on Coals is from a poem. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's from a Buddhist poem by Anne Waldman, who is a Buddhist poet. And it's a beautiful poem about the hungry ghost, which is a part of Buddhism, which is that part of us that is always craving, seeking, desperate for more, desperate for fulfillment, and never quite attaining it.
There's a certain restlessness there. And again, because of the coals and you keep like moving. And I love, I read somewhere you say the race to enlightenment or fame, whichever comes first, which I think is hilarious.
Right. I'll take anything.
Yeah. So, what drove you to become here an overperformer? And we're going to dive into your book too a bit more with more details. But what do you think is that drive for fame or enlightenment or whatever it is that's driving you?
Well, I was sent away to boarding school at a very young age when I was 11, and I had such a strong longing to go home, to be taken home by my mother, and I couldn't get that. And so that longing transposed itself onto recognition, validation, approval, and then after that, enlightenment, peace, whatever would fill the longing. And eventually I came to realize that there wasn't anything to fill the longing. It was simply about finding a way to be present in this moment.
That's wonderful. Exactly. Yeah. And I had that drive for fame too for the longest time, even enlightenment too. And at one point I was like, I will go to a monastery and I go move to Japan or something. But then I realized like, if I want to have it, if I'm going to have enlightenment, I can have it anywhere. Right. And I
Right.
think that's the point. You don't have to go to a specific place. You don't need to be famous to get that recognition for yourself. And that was a learning experience where now I was like, I don't really care. It would be nice, right? I'd still welcome it. Same as
Mm.
money and fame and success, but that's kind of not that important overall.
Right. It's not out there. It's what you find in here. It's your ability to be content with what is now.
hmm And I want to look at your journey and in your memoir because I love how you're starting off with this very kind of idyllic, but very kind of almost trivial scene of like everyday life, but how there's beauty in that and how there's satisfaction and fulfillment in that. Is that the idea you had to start off like that on just a regular day, having breakfast, pancakes, going out for nature excursions and so on? Is that what you wanted to show here as a starting point?
Right. In fact, that it is mundane, that it is
Mhm.
trivial, that it's in
Mhm.
those daily, quotidian moments in our life that when we're so busy looking for more, looking for some intensity, looking for some peak experience, we miss the fact that joy is in a pancake breakfast with our
Yes.
family.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, exactly because we miss that often because we're
Yeah.
so like obsessed with our own like drive, right? You're on those coals and you can just step away and just realize, hey, there's grass there. I don't have to dance on these coals.
Yes, exactly.
And so you give excellent snapshots of different eras as well. So we get a bit of the hippie zeitgeist as well. And can you talk about that a little bit? And I want to talk about Stallion too, and if that was his real name.
Well, I came up in the 70s, which was uh, a very unusual, wild time, especially in the theater,
Hmm.
because the theater was turning itself on its head. It was no longer supporting the Shakespearean, accented, memorizing lines, strutting around on a stage, but it was more revolutionary, cataclysmic, movement oriented, very high level intensity, acrobatics, physical gesture. And so it was really exciting. And I think all of the arts, music definitely went through it, theater went through it. I'm sure the visual arts went through it. This, as you're calling it, the hippie era turned everything on its head.
Yeah.
And so it was exciting. And unfortunately, now I look back, I was hoping we were changing everything. And now we're back to the way things were before that era. So nothing much
Yeah.
changed, in fact.
Yeah, yeah, and it's also as I was reading it, there's like this kind of is eerie, right? And some of it is creepy. I was like, it reminded me of Charles Manson. I do mention him later on too. It's like it's kind of dangerous how people fell for that, and just
Mm,
like very intelligent people, but you fell for that kind of ideal, that longing that you're talking about, and
mm.
you idealize people who are not ideal, especially Stalin in our case.
Right, right. Well, that relationship was, I was a young woman and I made a series of mistakes of looking in the wrong places for love or belonging or affirmation. And I did get myself into some relationships that were, again, revolutionary, that were breaking the mold and trying new things. And there was a lot of excitement about it, and there was a lot of growth that came from it. But it was also abusive in its own way. And some of my theatrical experiences were somewhat abusive as well. So, as young women, especially, we're very vulnerable to suggestion and we're vulnerable to finding approval from sources of power that should not be wielding that power on vulnerable young women. So that's part of my story as well.
And that was a big thing back then to feminism. And then you see like these things happening. So there's kind of like a disconnect that I feel like, on one side, you're saying this and you're preaching this. On the other, you're not even reading women writers. And you're mentioning that and how that is kind of seen as taboo in an era that claims it's feminist.
Right, right. Well, I was finding my path in all male environments.
Mhm.
And so the currency that I was working with was testosterone, was high energy, was
Mhm.
masculine, competitive. And
Yeah.
so that's what I was wielding. That's the power that I was wielding. So I wasn't in touch with my feminine power. And the feminism of those days was just finding its feet too. There was a lot of conflict in the feminist movement.
Mhm.
There was a lot of people fighting over who got a space, who got a place at the table in the feminist movement.
Mhm.
And it sort of defeated itself. But
Mhm.
it was the beginning of feminism. And I think what we didn't realize at the time was that feminism is really about finding your voice as a woman and
Yes.
finding your voice not in a way that competes with the male voice or compares with the male voice, but stands on its own and is utterly different from the male voice.
Yeah, not emulating or copying because I see that often. It's like, well, you just like men, but you're not, and it just doesn't feel right. Again, I completely agree with that. And also, like the fact that literature, it's and poetry and all this opens it up to this inner voice that we can express ourselves, and
Mm.
that's rare. I mean, you get discourses that people are talking, their speeches, they're wonderful, but when you deep down, that's really literature and poetry that dives us into, brings us into that perspective, and so
Yes.
that you can connect with other people's voices, and especially also women writers, and say, "Oh, this is how I'm feeling," and recognize yourself or parts of
Mm.
yourself within that. And I think
Yeah.
that's wonderful that we have that tool of literature and poetry, and we should really cherish it. And it's our perspective into another person's life, and we don't have
Yes.
that. We can do
I don't.
podcasts, and I can't get inside your head or your feelings. It's just what you're stating. But in a way, with a book, you can because you're just entering that worldview, and especially in a book like yours, where you're quite candid, very honest. There's lots of things there, and you're not holding back, and that's wonderful because then we're entering into that sphere, your world, and
Mm.
this is my world here. But here we're meeting. Our worlds are meeting.
Yes, yes. And in the theater, I couldn't manage that deep dive. I
Hmm.
tried to do that deep dive with the last play I produced and performed in, and it was very nuanced and very feminine and very shadowy and dark, and it wasn't accepted with the exuberance that my testosterone uh, shows were accepted with. And so that's when I threw up my hands and said, I'm not going to be able to find my voice in this world.
Yeah, yeah. And
That
it's
world, the
because
theater.
you are performing, and when you're performing for an audience, and it's
Mm,
their reaction that kind of molds it. It's like social media too. You're going for the likes, you want the retweets. Whereas like your book is like, I'm just gonna sit down. I won't see my readers. I hope
mm,
they take it well, but there's like that kind of private space that you have where you can truly express yourself. But I think there are limits. There's like censorship, self-censorship when you're performing, when
mm.
you're doing that, and you say next time let's not say this because they didn't respond well to it, right? They're constantly like modifying it. Whereas I think you can really be yourself through something like writing, like a fictional writing, or again autobiographical writing.
Yes, I think so too. Yeah. Or psychotherapy. The two realms I chose to transition into were both very welcoming of authenticity and vulnerability.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to know. So how did you get to psychotherapy of finding that path? And it's like again, there's progressions. There's the a bit lost, confused young woman who's kind of finding herself, performing, and then you get to psychotherapy. What was the probably one of the main events that you say moved you in that direction of psychotherapy?
Well, as I said, the last play I produced was a feminine piece, very nuanced and shadowy, and it was not received as well as the extroverted, flashy fireworks pieces. And so I said I had a kind of a cataclysmic moment that I'm not going to find my voice in this realm. I need to drop out of this realm and find a different realm. And I had no idea what that was. And so I went into what the Jungians call a dark night of the soul,
Mm.
where you go into a descent and it's basically a leap into the unknown where you don't know what's next. And it's a moment for despair, a moment for you disconnect from all of your identities. You
Mm.
don't know what is going to come in next. And there's a beautiful openness to that space because it's kind of a space of prayer. It's kind of a space of asking for guidance, show me the way. And if you can tolerate it, I believe guidance does come in and show you what the next step is. And guidance took me over to a master's program in psychology and said, try this on.
Uh-huh.
And I loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved learning. I loved working with people. I loved the information about the brain and the psyche and the emotions and the relationships. And it was that whole feminine world. It was
Yeah.
that world where my voice was powerful and strong and I could use it well. And so I got my master's, went off and started a career as a counselor and have been doing that. So it was a complete pivot, you could say.
Mhm, mhm, exactly. And so, what role does spirituality play for you? I mean, it's like
Mm,
Jung is somebody who I would consider more spiritual than many others who are out there, right? And he's
mm,
taking the field in a different direction as well. And
mm,
how did that? What role did it play in your life too? And like the insights you got from it. What would you like
mm.
to share with us here?
Well, I do think that childhood trauma opens us to a deep connection with spirituality often,
Mhm.
because when we can't get what we need from those who are caregivers, we often develop a longing that takes us into other dimensions or other realms. And for me, there was a moment when I was 10 years old and I went in, my mother was a devout atheist, and I went into a Catholic church and felt this sacredness, this ritual, this holiness, the smells and the sights and the symbols. And I said to my mother, I want to be a Catholic. And she said, over my dead body.
Oh.
So I couldn't get the spiritual sustenance that I needed then, but I always had it. And so when I finally transitioned into psychology, I began to find that soul place. And probably being in the dark night of the soul and that unknown also opens you up to the soul and what is spirit and where does guidance come from and what is intuition. And so that was the beginning for me. And I went into Buddhist meditation and became quite practiced in Buddhist meditation. I still do a lot of that. And it was a way of connecting with the bigger heart, the bigger self.
Mhm.
And so it's, I think, essential to healing. That's why my work as a counselor was always connecting spirituality with trauma, because trauma is being caught in the little self and
Mhm.
caught in the struggle and the suffering. And that's so important and such a necessary part of us as humans. But we also have access, as you know, to a bigger self, a bigger heart, a bigger expanded awareness of what this life is about.
And that takes so much courage to go through it. There's like another door that you open up, and it's like I love Plato's cave of like walking out, and it's that's what
Mm,
you're doing. You don't have to stay there. You can evolve. You can go
mm,
through that, and once you deal with that, again, very hard thing to do, but once you deal with that, it's just so liberating. It's just everything is so beautiful, and
mm.
like the Buddhists who say or Zen Buddhism, they say how mountains are mountains, then they're not mountains, and they're mountains again. But when you go back to that perspective, they're very different mountains than when you started off with, you know?
Yes.
And you see everything in a different light. Like even like pancakes become like just a wonderful thing that we have and we take for granted or we ignore in daily life.
Right, right. It's just this moment right now. All the
Yeah.
great teachers are telling us
Yeah.
be in this moment, love this moment, find the joy in this moment.
But intellectually, we know that it's just like it just doesn't resonate on a deeper level. And like you're saying, the bigger
Right.
self that needs to be activated, and you do have to go through that dark valley to get there, I find.
Yes. And that's what I wanted to do with the memoir, actually, is to give readers a visceral experience of the striving, the craving, the
Mhm,
desperation,
mhm, mhm,
and the opening,
mhm,
and the silence, and the peace, and then more striving, and more desperation, and then opening, and peace. And so I didn't just want it to be an intellectual
mhm.
trajectory,
Right.
but a
Yeah.
felt sense of what that's like to inhabit that.
Yeah. I just recently watched a movie, Monsieur Aznavour, about Charles Aznavour,
Mm.
the French musician, and how
Yes.
he had this drive. Again, I'm thinking of the same thing. He was like always like on these coals, and he's like pushing forward, working
Mm.
hard to reach like what he wanted. And his goal was to earn the same salary as Frank Sinatra, which he did at one point.
Oh,
And then he's like, but what about now? What's next? And the last half an hour of the film is like, well, once you've achieved those goals, what comes next? And he was not happy about it,
ah,
which I found amazing for like, a biopic that like deals with it. It's not like, oh, happily ever after. It's like, now I've achieved all my goals and what's the next step?
exactly, exactly. That's the hungry ghost right there.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And the thing with the Hungry Ghost is it's never satisfied. It's always
Right.
roaming around, eating everything, and just can't find satisfaction.
No, because it's always looking outside itself.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not out there.
And I also want to talk about the importance of love when you realize like there is a different kind of love. And again, having partners is one thing, but then it's like something that resonates with you. And what would you like to say about that? Because I'm an incurable romantic myself, so that resonates with me a lot.
Well, I think of love in two ways. I think
Mhm.
of my partner, my husband, who taught me safety in relationship, which I had never had before. And so
That's
as
so
we
important. That's so
so
important.
important to feel
More important
safe.
than the passion and the wild emotions, I think. Yeah.
Yes, because when you feel safe, your heart opens.
Yes.
And when your heart opens, then you're really available for conversation and intimacy with another person.
Mhm.
So that's one kind, that's human love, which is
It's
so
also being
essential.
vulnerable in that case, because if you feel safe, you open up, you're vulnerable, and then that's how you can grow together and express yourself. Whereas
Yes.
like when a relationship is kind of like superficial, I would say, or you try to protect yourself from the other, you're holding back, then there is no real intimate connection there, I think.
That's right. And it's rare, actually, that you have a heart-opened, intimate connection with
Yes,
someone.
it is rare.
It's very rare. And I imagine when you have conversations with people on the podcast, you're looking for that intimate connection. And
Yes.
that's what your goal is, right?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes I find it, yeah. And that's it. But yeah, exactly. But the other thing is you do have to try and you have to be okay with when it's not working out.
Right.
It's like taking that risk and being okay and not blaming yourself or feeling guilty about things and, kind of
Yes.
also moving on. I want to say another movie that I thought of as I was going through your memoir is La La Land, strangely enough.
Ah,
And the
yes.
ending in particular. And would you
Yes.
say like there's like a point where you say, okay, I have a choice to make. Am I gonna
Mm,
go with this, the performer, the artist, and so on, or am I going to settle, quote unquote, in a family life with someone where I kind of don't follow those dreams? And I think the movie showed that, and there was pain in either choice. Like it's not easy.
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Pain in either choice. I think I'm thinking of the movie Black Swan also
As
had that
well. Yeah.
same choice.
Hmm.
Do you go for the mundane? Do you go for the ordinary?
Hmm.
Or do you go for the heightened experience? And um, yeah, I think for me the choice is a very clear one. You go for the moment, you go for the ordinary, you go for the joy, because joy is only in the ordinary. There might be fleeting moments of joy in a great review or
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
claim of some kind, but it's very fleeting and it's not satisfying.
Yes. Yeah.
But the joy that's in the present moment is enriching and deep and alive, and that's what we're really looking for, right?
Yeah, and feeling at home in your own skin, in your surroundings, in your relationships, and so on. And I find like, and that's often missing, and was missing in my life too. But then when you change within you, you're attracting all the good stuff, the right people, and they enter into your life, and
Mm,
it's like you're elevating everything, and you just like
mm,
get rid of all the stuff that's not working, the negativity or people who are negative and toxic, and it's kind of just, they fall apart because you're not feeding them anymore. You
mm.
are in a different state. And I find that quite fascinating, that kind of progression we have sometimes.
Yeah, and that's the goal, the real goal of life, right? Is to transmit that
Hmm.
and to be a beacon for that and to hopefully let people come to you and participate with that. If you can be that lamppost or that lighthouse,
Hmm.
that's the true goal.
Hmm. And not to just be driven by others. And I think like people pleasing is something that we have as artists too.
Hmm.
I mean, you do want to please your audience, and that's like when people become successful, then there's the pressure. It's like now I have to follow through with it, and
Mm,
and and often you get lost in that. You lose your voice because you're
mm,
trying to please your fans, your audience, and so on. But then
mm.
you lose something in that process.
You do. And that's what I love. The Tao Te Ching says the answer is not in success and it's not in failure.
Yeah.
They are
And this is
both
why
misleading.
why I love Bob Dylan because he's like, I don't care. I'm just gonna be myself and follow me or don't, but reinventing
Yes.
himself. And I think that's really important, staying true to yourself, I think.
Yes. Yeah. That's
And
right.
just a couple things too. In your book, there's you mentioned your grammar Nazi, and I'd like to mention that. I think it's hilarious. Yeah, there's so many funny bits in it. So what would you say about that?
Well, I did go to a British school growing up because I grew up in Nassau in the Bahamas, and
Cool.
you do learn grammar in a British school.
Mm.
You learn how to parse a phrase. You learn all the parts of a phrase, and most Americans don't learn that. And so
Yeah.
you find that I was being taught by this wonderful clinician who was a psychiatrist in a hospital. He was brilliant, but his grammar was terrible, and so. So the grammar Nazi in me came out, and I was going, how can he teach me anything if he thinks that the plural of diagnosis is diagnoses?
I'm with you. I've been a language instructor for like over 2 decades, so that like I'm a big fan of grammar, right? But I also like sometimes they just hold back. It's like okay, just let them be. You know?
Right.
They're happy with their false perception of language. It's okay.
That's right. You don't really need it. You don't
You
need to
don't
do
really
it
need it.
correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And also, I mean, I was thinking also of Shakespeare's All the World's a Stage. And so
Mm,
in a way, we're also always kind of performing too. There's all these different roles that we're playing. Well, I mean, we can still be true to ourselves, but still, you have to wear different hats or
mm.
different makeup in different situations, right?
Yes. Yes. And the whole point of enlightenment, right, is that we gradually disidentify from all of those roles. And we
Right.
find that we can put on the hat, put on the makeup, do the part, but that we don't believe it anymore. We're not buying it
Yeah.
anymore. It's
Yes, it's
really,
not you. It's not
it's
really
not
you.
me.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Yeah.
then enjoy it like a performer. It's like just have a good time with that role.
Yes.
And I think a lot of us just take things very seriously, including our jobs, you know, our
Mm,
profession. So if you're like you're a CEO, you think you're always a CEO in every situation, and you know, it's like no, you play your role. You know, that's your
right.
role, and that role can come to an end just like that. You know, you
Mm,
could be not a CEO anymore the next day, right? Whereas
right.
being yourself is something that's lifelong, and you want to make sure that's really who you are.
I once heard, I can't remember who said this, but I heard this wonderful definition of enlightenment. They said if, on a scale of 1 to 100, if one is being completely identified with your roles and your identities and your stories, and 100 is being totally disidentified with your roles and your stories and your identities, then that's enlightenment. And we all exist somewhere on that spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was Bob Thurman who told me that some people are enlightened, but they don't know it, which I
Uh-huh.
found fascinating. And I think that's true. It's like, yeah, you just don't are not aware of it, but you are already enlightened.
I think my husband's one of those.
Oh yeah, cool, awesome. That's wonderful. So again, Cynthia Moore, you are a playwright, performer, mental health counselor, author, and you enjoy all those roles equally. Yes.
I do. I don't perform anymore, and
Okay.
I'm not a playwright anymore, but yes, I love all those roles.
Yeah, but have you thought maybe of taking it on again just for
I'm
fun?
not so I don't think performance has much of a draw for me. It
Mhm.
really did come from a place of people pleasing and
Mm.
seeking affirmation. So I don't think I can transition that into just doing it for the joy of doing it. If I could, I would be drawn to it, but I'm
Mhm.
not.
Okay, wonderful. And your memoir is Dancing on Coals, a memoir of an overperformer. It's fun, it's enlightening, it's thought-provoking. Thank you so much for writing it, and thank you so much for being here on Arash's World.
Thank you, Arash.